In a recent commencement speech, Justice Alito made some remarks concerning freedom of speech. Is it really freedom of speech, or is it freedom of speech the way that he would like to see it? Kelly has the story. Kelly?
Justice Samuel Alito did seemingly refer to current unrest over Gaza when he said that freedom of speech is declining drastically in the USA, especially on college campuses. Now, he made these comments at a commencement speech, as you mentioned, at the Franciscan University of Steubenville, which is a Catholic college in Ohio. Interestingly, though, it appears he never really outlined exactly what the protesters were doing that was endangering free speech. And it's no surprise to me that he would come out now for free speech after a recent news expose accused him of flying a flag upside down in front of his residence. Now, flag flying, of course, has been a staple of free speech throughout American history, but Alito's voting record on the bench has been just the opposite of support for free speech, and I think we're going to get to that at many points in the past. This story is by Lawrence Hurley. It was published by NBC News on May 11th, 2024.
Thanks, Kelly. So I just got a couple of questions and that I would love for you to kind of expand on or get your thoughts on. Can you give us some insight on why you think specifically Alito feels freedom of speech is declining, specifically amidst the college campuses of today because of protest?
You know, that's an interesting question. And one of the things I want to point out that he was at a Catholic college where I don't think like if you were going to be speaking out against the Pope, you probably wouldn't be allowed to do that. So it was at a place where freedom of speech is probably not total, right? And I thought that was kind of interesting. But I did want to know exactly what it was that he said was happening here. And I did a lot of digging into this story. I went to like 8 different sources trying to get more information on what exactly it was he was talking about. And it seems he never answered. So I'm not exactly sure what was in his mind. But by some of the things that he did say during the commencement speech, it seems like he was saying that it's okay to have freedom of speech as long as you agree with what I think is right. And I think that that's something that has been a hallmark of his career on the bench throughout his history there.
Freedom of speech for me as long as you agree with me.
Yes, correct. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, Infidel, you mentioned a warning concerning the abandonment of core religious values, something that Alito brought up, I believe, in his commencement speech. Could you expand on that a bit, what you meant?
Well, once again, I think that Alito's done a really good job of not saying what he's wanting to convey. Same as I think we know what he was talking about with what Kelly was talking about. It's about if you're not telling the narrative that I want to hear, then there's a problem. And I think with this, when he's saying hold firm to his religious convictions, I'm reminded when I was a kid, when my dad would sarcastically say, "Don't confuse me with the facts. My mind is made up." And so I really think that he wants the children, and these aren't kids, but the younger people in the speech that are hearing this and all these people, he wants them to hear that, look, don't be bothered or swayed by those inconvenient facts. Hold on to those religious convictions, because that's what, in my opinion, he's pretty much done from the bench already. It says, don't confuse me with the facts, because he's looked, in my opinion, to expand religious overreach, not to say, anything about freedom or anything like that. It's about, stick with religion. And that's what I think he's trying to convey.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me that even despite his strong stance per se on freedom of speech, he actually shown limits in his support. Notably, he was the sole dissenter in the 2011 Supreme Court decision that upheld the Westboro Baptist Church's right to picket a military veteran's funeral, arguing that such actions constitutes a vicious verbal assault rather than protected free speech. So again, it goes to this whole nebulous area when we're talking about, freedom of speech versus like religious virtue. More so like him personally virtue signaling rather when it comes to how we're supposed to actually use freedom of speech and only to protect religious statutes. But Cindy, I had want to ask you about something specifically concerning Alito's emphasis on the importance of standing firm on one's beliefs in the face of pressure to conform. How do you think recent Supreme Court rulings have impacted religious freedoms in the United States? In trust, we know that, of course, you are so interested in what happens in the United States, but I'm curious to know your thoughts.
No, I am. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, right?
Right.
No, from the outside, it seems like the last 6 years have been in the U.S. A huge mess, and that's putting it lightly. I think Trump didn't think that cheating the way he did to put three justices, very conservative justices. I don't think he thought it would go that far because, he wanted to appoint them so that he could brag about it to his base, as he's been doing so far. He wanted to repeal Roe versus Wade because that's what his base wanted to. But I don't think he's prepared to what's coming. We know that soon they will have to weigh in regarding contraceptives. There's been a case in Louisiana recently, and Trump is not in favor of preventing contraception, obviously, because his past is, let's say, wild. So he doesn't want this, but he's going to get it anyway. I don't understand how so few people can have so much power. I'm not sure this exists anywhere else. But the true problem here is that they are needed because the U.S. thinks that the Constitution is like the Bible. It's been written once, and it applies to every generation. And that's not how it works. You cannot rule people from 2024 with laws and ideas that come from 250 years prior to that. I'm French. The French constitution has been changed recently several times. The last time it was, I think, in 1958. And there's talks to change it again. So, and by change, I mean rewritten entirely. And that needs to happen in the US. When I listen to the news, I hear, the founding fathers, they wanted this, they wanted that. Who cares? Who cares?
I think there's a kind of a fear to do something like that in the U.S. from both sides, from both political sides. I think that the right is afraid the left will get too much if we rewrite the Constitution, and conversely, the left is too afraid the right's going to get too much. And we have to go through such a huge process with all the states agreeing to it individually to have it done. I don't think it'll ever get done. I agree it needs to be done, but I don't know that it ever will be, unfortunately, just because of the way we've set up the laws here in the U.S. to be able to do it.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I as much as I'm like, Viva la Revolution. I said that completely wrong. I'm so sorry. But Viva la Revolutionario. But regardless of that, the issue, even if we're bringing up the founders, is that they knew that as the country actually grew in population, in culture, in technology and things of that nature, that you're not going to be able to use laws that were written in the 1780s to rule in 2024. So that's what amendments were supposed to do. But I think that even right now we're still in a crisis when it comes to how we are being governed per se, because we still have a deadlock in a very partisan Congress, and we also have a deadlock when it comes to what is happening from the highest court in the land. And that kind of brings me to you, Infidel, because I was just thinking that about Justice Kavanaugh. He noted that unpopular rulings can later become integral to American constitutional law. So I know that you were talking about some of the things that, happened when it came to rulings by the Supreme Court that I would think that we would consider unpopular. Can you expand on that and think of any other historical examples where this has occurred?
Unfortunately, the ones that I do find that I would say, while controversial at the time, are not so controversial now, are still unfortunately far from universal. I mean, something as basic as the Brown versus Board of Education. I think that there are unfortunately people who would still say, yeah, when we made the wrong choice there. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, to get to that, we'd have to recognize that, there was separate but equal, Plessy and Ferguson, Dred Scott. So there was a lot of bad decisions made to get to a good one that I still don't think is universal. But at least I hope it's a decision that we can't reverse or won't reverse. But, the truth is you never know, because, Cindy mentioned birth control. That's one of those things that's a decision made by Supreme Court as well. That's not something protected by law. So there are all sorts of things in the air that could be, and of course, school prayer. That's something that I think that they did that made the right choice. But I could also see that being something that gets reversed here as long as we keep this fever pitch that we're seeing right now of the strengthening of religious. Because right now what I see with Alito is that, forget Judge Alito, is it Father Alito, is it Priest Alito? Because really what he's doing is underhandedly he's promoting religion as a Supreme Court justice, and that is very concerning to me. Because when it comes down to good laws, one more that I wanted to touch on is the fact that I didn't realize that I was born before a company could say that they would not hire somebody because they had preschool kids. And Phillips versus Martin Marietta, good law, but that's crazy to think that that's just a decision made in the Supreme Court that could just as easily be reversed, because these people haven't exactly shown themselves to be friends of women, to be friends of any of the groups that we know who have gained rights through some of these. So who knows? And that is very unsettling. But I agree. I personally myself fear the idea of having a constitutional convention, because I just don't know what could come of it. Because once you throw all the cards on the table, there's some people out there who want some very bad things. And I'm just not ready to give that up yet.
Yeah, it's kind of scary when you really just think about how a lot of times people thought that certain Supreme Court decisions would just stay into place because of, what's the word that we all know? Precedent, right? Precedent has set this up to be this way for so many years, so it's not going to change. But we saw that even though that Roe v. Wade was the standard marking when it came to how we govern abortion for over 50 years, that precedent just ran out the window like yesterday's trash, right? And we can definitely see that, happening as other court cases are coming before the Supreme Court. And Alito has already shown himself to be a person that is going to, I was actually talking to my partner. I was trying to think of this word when it came to how the court justices will use like laws not that was written in yesteryear, and also even maybe in other countries, in order to kind of formulate how they would make their decisions. And I just think about how he per se in his concurrence when it came to Roe v. Wade being overturned, like he was citing laws from the 1600s, when they were still burning witches at the stake per se, so it's it's very concerning that you got like a person like this, like that's sitting on the Supreme Court, who has a senior role, who is very influential, and they're still making decisions that could affect all of our lives. And we see how it can really affect us even in the adverse. But, Cindy, I want to ask you about the human factor. In this story concerning Alito and how it is getting in the way of what he should be saying, what really should he be saying versus what we are getting from him?
Well, he's spreading an idea that's been around the far right. You can only how can I say that? It's just only the right is silenced. And that's something we've been hearing from Elon Musk, from Trump, from all over the far-right movement. And the problem is there's a difference between me saying what you say is wrong and me not allowing you to speak. He's claiming the latter happens when, in fact, it's very, very, very often the former. And that's why I always come back to critical thinking, because critical thinking teaches you the difference between the two. And yeah, having someone who is so powerful in this country making these kind of bad arguments, and not just bad because they rely on bad information, but because they are deeply flawed, the arguments themselves. And so having that at this level of power, it's very frightening. And it comes to education, and we're going to talk about this later, but yeah, it's very scary.
And I just wanted to say that persecution complex is, I believe, what you're talking about. And they are definitely very quick to say, no, if you disagree with me and prove me wrong, you're persecuting me, not disagreeing. You're trying to silence me by just showing how foolish I am, when really they're just being dishonest.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's in line with the Christian persecution complex. Like it's no surprise that we're talking about a Catholic right here. So, yeah.
If anybody knows about persecuting people in order for them to go ahead and kowtow to their will, the Catholics know all about that, don't they?
Catholics know how to do that. Yeah.
Oh boy, they do it well, I tell you. But Kelly, I want to give you the last say here. This whole thing about discussing freedom of speech, even Alito mentioning freedom of religion being imperiled. Is this really the case, or do you really think this is just his perspective?
No, I think you're right. I think it's probably his perspective, and I think we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, Cindy mentioned how the right is always saying that they're the ones being silenced, and obviously they're the ones that have the loudest voice. And one of the things that you do to belittle your opponent to make them look smaller is to accuse them of the things you're doing before they have a chance to do it, to accuse you of the things that you actually are doing. Excuse me. And they're doing that very well. And I think this was a perfect example of that, there's a quote that, here, let me see if I can pull it up here real quick. When you venture out into the world, you may well find yourself in a job or a community or a social setting when you will be pressured to endorse ideas that you don't believe or to abandon core beliefs. And it will be up to you to stand firm. Like he's telling these graduating college students, you're going to go out into the world and everybody's going to be trying to tell you that you got to turn away from the thing, your core beliefs, your core religious beliefs. Let's face it, this is a religious college, and that you got to stand firm and don't listen to what those people are telling you. Even though they have free speech, don't listen to them. And I think that's important to look at, to see the underlying message that he's giving here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the irony is thick when a justice known for controversial rulings, including overturning Roe v. Wade, warns about free speech and religious liberty. And Alito's comments reflect broader cultural battles with the Supreme Court at the forefront of defining these rights. As always, the balance between protecting free expression and maintaining public order remains a contentious and evolving issue. But what is not contentious or not an evolving issue is if you want to watch more nonprofits rather. So click here.